somehow have a bit of less of a formal presentation on the ethics of AI, because I know the subject has been overly discussed in the news, but not just in the news, in a lot of forums. And I was hoping that today we're going to be taking an approach that's a little bit more light-hearted, but in the same time, in an approach that hopefully will give you the biggest takeaway that you can take is that you are part of it. This is not, the ethics of AI is not only done by people who call themselves ethicists or academics or people who work in big technology companies, but in a way, in the only way, the ethics of AI is about the moral compass all of us have, and we have a duty of care to apply it in everything we do with technology. But first of all, I wanted us to take a little bit of a stock of where we are with this story of AI, because obviously we can't really separate talking about ethics of it without understanding where we are with AI in general. And obviously we lead, or there are extraordinary times around us, and is enough to open your screen, your social media, or TV, because those days we are limited in how much we interact with others, to understand the profound disruption and change this virus has brought to us. And while some of the changes could be seen as negative, I'm a big believer in using crises as events when we turn something that is unpredicted and sometimes with negative impact into a positive. Because yes, it's actually true. What doesn't kill us, it makes us stronger. And that's the case with AI. The fact that in the era of economic crisis that follows this pandemic, and it's already started, we would need to use all the instruments we have available to be actually able to get us out on the other side. And for many, especially in the decision-making seats, AI seems to represent that tool that can do a lot in the current context. And based on the research, the many researches that we have done in PwC, and we've been talking with C-suites, but also with many professionals in the AI field, we've acknowledged that AI is used more and more and more in the enterprise. At the moment, in the most recent research we have done around responsible AI, we've uncovered that there's only 5% of companies do not use AI, compare with a higher percentages in previous studies. Also very important is that the CFOs, when asked how do they see the role of AI in recovering from the current context, they reported that they are looking at automation, which is, I would say, the building block for AI, as a way to accelerate it and accelerate recovery. And if automation is done right and in such a high number of cases, we can always assume that AI will follow very quickly and very swiftly. When it comes to the AI story, the ethics story for AI, I think it's fair to say that we've heard from our clients we have interviewed, part of this research, is that there is a lot of interest on aligning the AI development and use with the moral stance. But while many have started, at least understanding where they are, and many have also kick off various initiatives, there is little coordination between those initiatives. And with that also a big missed opportunity. The fact is there is no holistic view of how ethics in general permeates throughout a life cycle. And with that, the fact that sometimes the areas where unethical behavior cripples the most are sometimes overlooked. Also, what we have witnessed is this siloed approach to ethics in general, ethics of tech in general, the fact that there are separate groups that talk about data ethics, others about digital ethics, and very different ones that talk about AI ethics. Well, where you see it through the perspective of someone in the board or a CEOs, there shouldn't be such separation, because ultimately when we talk about values, as we've done it in the past, in building sustainable and good businesses, we were looking across the value chain. So it makes sense in a way to look at how do we bring together all those different domains of tech ethics and being able to have a cohesive approach that is build on the value stance and vision that each of those organizations have. And lastly, I think there was a lot of focus on the ethical principles, and also a lot of assessment of how just focusing on ethical principle doesn't work. From our research, we have scanned over 120 documents. There were either manifests or charters of code of conduct, and we've extracted 155 principles. And while you have both advocates and detractors of the principles, the way you'll see it later in my presentation, I think about it is the most important starting point in your ethical journey. The fact that you had organizations like OECD or European Commission or Partnership on AI, or even the private organization that have thought about those principles based on the research that existed at the day, is almost like a bit of a ready meal. And I'm saying it with a pinch of salt, because it shouldn't be taken literally as it comes, and it should be a process of adapting those golden rules and principles to your own context. They help us accelerate a little bit the journey, and give us a bit of a few steps ahead, which are so needed when you look at the speed with which AI is being adopted and being used. And lastly, probably the most important thing to keep in mind, that AI is not only set to deliver huge benefits in multiple areas of economy, but also comes with many strings attached, and in many cases those are in fact harms, both for individuals but also for society in general. And what I put on the screen is just a snippet from the many examples that have been surfaced in the media in the last 6 to 12 months alone, about failings, ethical failings of AI, from enhancing discrimination of all sorts, all the way to problem of transparency and explainability, surveillance, and psych operation, or in exacerbating this further inequalities. So it's a stark reminder almost every other day that the harms of AI, it's not something that is in the future, as likes of Elon Musk or Stephen Hawking have talked about it in the past, but it's real and present dangers. The risks are here, and we are in no way equipped to address them, because we can't, first of all, bring it to light. So what you see here on the screen, and all the cases that have been reported by the research and the advocacy community, it was because there was unfortunate events that those examples were brought to life, and someone had the right skill and experience to be able to assess and determine that those solution algorithm or AI solution or chatbot or bot was causing harm. But it's worth saying that potentially there are many other solutions out there that we might not even label AI, or might be more basic algorithms that are embedded in processes, automated or semi-automated, that deliver an outcome to citizens, patients, customer, clients, and we don't have a way to assess how effective or how well they behave against a set of values. And what is the set of values anyway? The next, I wanted us to focus a little bit more on why does it matter, right? Because I think it's clear that we have a powerful tool out there that is set to deliver us great benefits, but also brings some unintended consequences and some quite intimidating and terrifying risk, enough to look at or watch The Big Hack or famous and slash infamous The Social Dilemma, to actually acknowledge the size of those harm that could be inflicted by something like AI. But I want us to take a little bit of a different perspective. And I said I'm here to give you some thought provocation on why does it matter. It matters, as I said, is the fact that so far a lot of the focus on AI was somehow to the extreme. It's either on the benefits framing, which it says AI is going to impact the global economy and various sectors with that much trillion of dollars. And on the other hand, you see a different dialogue that's coming mainly from the research and the activist community, very well established in US, but also here in UK, that says this technology at scale will actually damage a lot of individuals, but society as a whole. And we have no way at the moment, no proper tools, both legal or regulatory wise or any other tools, to be able to address it. So how can we actually, instead of having one or the other narrative, to have a more balanced approach that looks at both benefit and risk together? And instead of us being either overly excited or overly terrified about AI, actually have a little bit of a more balanced approach from early stages, when we are in a process of even drafting a problem statement, not only thinking about those issues when is a little bit too late in the process at a data set level, or when we program the algorithms, but when we even start considering what problem are we looking to solve using a technology like AI. The second different way of approaching the story of ethics of AI is the fact that AI is undoubtedly a mirror of a status quo. And it's a mirror of how we collect, source, and process data, right? And how instead of us relying on a given data set, we reach out to collect data that reflects different perspectives, different population, different ideas. And how well we do this or not is going to have a high impact on the ethical stance of the outcome that AI will deliver. Similarly, with how algorithms are being programmed and by whom. And we all know that AI has a big diversity problem, with only 18%, 18% of AI researchers being women, and not to mention the other groups being even less represented in something that is so important for the future of AI, which is the research. And with that, also the fact that we end up both unconsciously, willingly, unwillingly, or consciously codifying in the way we process data or we program those algorithms existing mental models, power structures, and power dynamics, and also patterns of behavior, patterns of classification, patterns of prediction. And while this could be both terrifying and liberating in the same time, if you think about the first thought provocation, is we should have a balanced approach when we look at AI, or when we look ourselves through AI lenses, because it's not just an opportunity or a reality moment or a moment of truth when we see all those things that as a humanity in different levels of society we wanted to ignore, and now we see it painfully, that we are racist, we discriminate, we push people aside. But also there is an opportunity for us to identify where these harms happen and being able to go back and rectify it. So it's not that doom and gloom, not just because we see a tool that has become or display bias and discriminatory traits, we should shut it down straight away. I think it's in our power, and it's linked very much with the confidence in a team of experts to be able to go back and remediate, to be able to go and listen, learn the lessons and create blueprints that will allow us to build better and better technology. When I say better, I mean more aligned with a set of values that it's important for each context. And the last provocation I want to give you is the fact that AI is in fact the perfect optimization tool. If you were thinking of the forefathers of capitalism and how they're probably dreaming of finding something almost like a magic tool that will allow them to do very efficient prediction and classification to allow for a better optimization of resource allocation, guess what? We actually have it. Is in our hand, and that's called machine learning and deep learning, which does wonder with prediction and classification. It's actually perfects it. I know perfection it doesn't exist, but take something that is human flaw, because we are not as good as predicting, and obviously classification has its own problems, but machine learning optimizes to an unprecedented scale any goal is being given. And when it operates at scale, it's something that surprises me. And I think I've heard it being mentioned by the participants in the Social Dilemma documentary, saying that at scale, AI displays unintended behaviors and presents insight and intelligence that were not necessarily thinking of, let aside program it. So it's this surprise element that with the right volume of data, machine learning is able to find new correlation, new relationship between the knowledge structures, and being able to help us go where we are not able to go before because of the limitation of us as individuals and us as a collective and operate. But also, again, the same perfect optimization tool ends up by codifying those mental models, power structures, and patterns, being able to optimize exactly those mental models, power structures, and patterns. And I want to repeat this is because this is one of the biggest dangers of the AI being a tool or a goal optimization tool. It will end up codifying something that we are many cases unaware of, our own mental models that allow us to behave in one way or another, allow us to be inclusive or to be racist. It allows us to be fair or unfair with groups of people. And those mental models, they were not built overnight. Those mental models, which are in fact at the core of creating the structures we operate by, the structure, the patterns of behavior, have been developed over throughout all our lives, and for a long series of input, like education in the family, our exposure to the society we grew up with, the education system, but also all the other interaction we have had across life. So while AI is this big humanity mirror, we should not be scared of it, and we should not necessarily label it as a black mirror, because we also have the opportunity, as we do with every mirror, to look at us with a little bit more due diligence and a little bit more reflection, and being able to say, we want to change it. And this time we have the opportunity to have much more targeted approach, and also use this perfect goal optimization tool to achieve us much faster those tools. So it's not all doom and gloom when we see ourselves in a mirror and we don't like it. We know that if we wake up and us as girls, we look in the mirror and we don't look our best, we always know that there's a way for us to look better that day. So we're not necessarily put off in the morning when we don't look our best. We do our best to regain looking the best, if you want. And why does it matter? Why does it matter for us to have this balanced approach? Is because it's a lot at stake, and it's not at stake just for those who currently become extremely rich and powerful using AI, or the ones in the political spectrum that have, to a certain extent, confiscated AI and politicized it. Is because ultimately this technology is taking over slowly various parts of our lives, and we need to be to have a higher level of awareness and understanding where this is going, so that we are able to participate as active, educated citizens and apply our moral compass in the way we deal with this technology, not just as a data scientist or an ethicist or a purchasing professional, but everyone who's surrounded by this technology, and being able to also represent and speak up for those who have less of an opportunity or less of a possibility to really understand something that is rocket science. I think, I'm very optimistic looking the interest and the conversation we have had on the topic, to see how much diversity is being brought to those conversations, and the fact that people are passionate about the subject of ethics of AI because it matters to them. It's something that is close to our heart because it's linked to our values and our morals, and we want most of us to actually see those values, the goodness that is in us, and we manifest in relation to the others, embedded in technologies that gradually will start replacing humans. How do we do it, right? So we have this discipline that has started to kind of craft and create and merge from the mainly the academic domain, but it's really important to have the right framing. And I'm hoping to give you a little bit of a flavor where the ethics of AI is coming, so that when you think about it, you also have I would say, the scientific and theoretical approach to it, and realize that while there are certain aspects of ethics of AI that we can all get involved and have an opinion about it, there are certain aspects that we need to be treating with care, like in medicines, right? While most of us can, when we have a bit of a cold or a bit of another problem, we can take a paracetamol, or we can exchange some, oh, I feel like this, what should I be doing? Maybe Googling, and find very quickly a cure, because it's a light condition. When we're talking about more serious condition, we don't ask Google. We actually go and visit a doctor, and therefore we rely heavily on experts. So it's important to keep in mind that because of the impact of AI, so profound and so deep on people's lives, we also have to recognize the importance of having deep knowledge experts that are trained to navigate the ethical complexities, especially for tools or for instances where we don't have a precedent. But ethics of AI is in fact rooted, is one of the applied ethics disciplines, and it talks about what is actually permissible in day-to-day actions and practicalities. And obviously, applied ethics is the branch of the wider science that ethics is, that looks at the actual study of moral issues and values in the real day-to-day life, and how we should navigate those. And obviously, all this is rooted into a wider domain, philosophy that help us work with meaning of life, understand the knowledge, the truth, and why are we here, right? And while understanding where ethics of AI is coming from, you see very quickly the importance of having not just everyone involved in this conversation, but people with the right expertise. Definitions are important, so are framing. So I think, especially when we talk about AI, because is this sometimes unknown based, and sometimes we're grappling and we're defining AI and using different lenses. Sometimes we explain its behavior, other times we are using by a list of the various technology that are labeled by AI. But what we should not lose from our definition is the key characteristic and traits, and it's the same with AI, with ethics of AI. When you try to define it, is sometimes difficult and abstract to stand by a definition. The ones you will find in the textbooks or in the documents and the policy documents that we've seen out there. But ultimately, the ethics of AI is nothing less than taking a moral stance that is keeps together organization and association, and being able to embed it in everything. And when I say everything, I mean literally everything when it comes to AI, in the design, in the build, in the acquisition, in the use, in the ownership, but also within the context that AI will operate, because we need to display knowledge, behavior, skills in order to be able to see the value stances being able to reflect it in autonomous machines. And one of the I would say the shortcomings of the conversation around ethics of AI is that for a long time, until quite recently, we have been focusing a lot on how do we devise a data set, how do we choose a definition of fairness on another. Is line better than shape when it comes explainability tools? But very quickly, those who have been at the forefront of creating those solutions have acknowledged that it's okay to focus on this, but it's not enough. And I think, in fact, the technical solution are the quickest one to achieve, but we still ended up having unethical tools, as it was the case with many of the use cases I've showed you at the beginning. And while a moral stance in one context or another is a very complex matter to navigate, because the value systems that currently exist in the world are so as different as the colors of the rainbow, and even more. And when we discuss about AI, we're talking about something that operates a very large scale, that passes cross cultures and cross geographies. It's important for us to keep in mind that we need this process up front, and understanding some golden rules and principles that will allow us to start the journey as soon as possible. I would say yesterday, because today, the speed of adoption of AI is increasing. So this is where we're turning towards the fantastic work done by academics and the researchers that and other professionals in the computer science world in general, not just AI, the ones working in robotics, in software development, in data in general, to give us a head start. And part of the work in PwC, we've actually went and researched those hundreds of documents and come up with 155, still identify 155 different principles. But when we analyze it, we discover it was just a matter of language. And in fact, all those 155 principles, you can more or less classify it in those principles that will allow you to have all the possible golden rules that exist at the moment for the knowns of the technology, because there's another side of the ethics of AI, which is all those instances where we don't have a precedent, where we haven't done it before. And that's where we need to go deeper into the philosophical and ethical theories to be able to make sense of it. But for what we know, I think we have those ethical principles that will allow us to, to, to start the journey. And while this is our approach. We build in PwC. It's always what we advise our clients is that you have organizations like OECD or European Commission that have done a lot of work and engaging a wide variety of stakeholders that have those principles, and you can use them as your starting ground. But the most important element, as you see from our framework, is to be able to take those golden rules and being able to adjust it to your context. I will also want us to talk a little bit of what ethics of AI isn't, because when we try to frame AI and then ethics, and we try to give a definition, sometimes we also don't say what it is or what are the boundaries through of the concept itself. And I want to stress that ethics is, and you'll probably hear it for those who have studied that subject in school, that is much more than law and compliance. And I think while this message is well understood in the academic community or the research community, in the industry itself, I think there is a tendency to say, oh, but if we are compliant with the law, that means that we don't have to worry about ethics. And this is something that has to sync well with everyone who starts this journey and working in organization like ours, is the fact that yes, law in fact is a universally accepted morality that is embedded in those laws, but there's a lot that is not embedded in there. And there are all the other layers, like the moral at society level, and the morality at or individual and associations level that is not codified in law. And we need that, because it's that's when you actually see the full spectrum of morality manifesting, but also an acknowledgement that AI is such a new thing that we don't have necessarily the laws to be able to govern it. But it's while the rules are important when you start the journey, is also very important to acknowledge that the target is not just to follow a set of rules. The target is to foster a good behavior, as we do in all the areas of life. The goal is not to follow a rule, a set rule, but also being able to really display throughout, in and out, a good behavior. And with that, the fact that it's not the one-off, the ethical thinking and reasoning, it doesn't happen at one stage of the process. It should theoretically happen, and hopefully practically soon, happen at every stage, because as we apply the ethical lenses to everything that we do, we have to do the same with AI. And lastly, it's not just a technical fix. I think it's enough to listen to the brilliant, and I'm a big fan, don't tell her, actually she knows, of Kate Crawford from AI Now. And she was talking about the limitation of the technical fixes for bias explainability at NeurIPS in 2017, if I recall well. And she was sending distress signal that it's not enough and it will never be enough. So we need to go outside the technical fixes into the process and people side and understand what it is. Very quickly, because I talked about what ethics is to remember that while sometimes, and I've said it with my colleagues and my boss, when I mentioned, or we started working on or bringing ethics into what we're doing day to day, there was a lot of, oh, but ethics is about Aristotle and about Kant and about, oh my God, I don't know nothing about those guys. I don't know what to do with it. And just, yeah, maybe it's something that we don't do. But more I work with them without even mentioning the word ethics per se and the reputation and the framing that exists, at least in, the industry, is the fact that ethics is not not about those guys and the thinking and the knowledge they have passed to us through the centuries and millennia, is in fact about being able to look at the status quo and be looking at it with different lenses and different perspective, and being able to challenge it and to ask questions, and being really able to understand the implication and the consequences of that particular context, and in this case technology. So while yes, there are domains where it requires us to tap into the ethical theories and framework, I think everyone can actually jump on this journey by actually pausing from what we do day to day, especially when it comes to technology, and try to reflect the consequences and the implication of one action over the other. And the way to do it is we're talking about I was talking about perspectives and different lenses to the AI. There are quite different ones that can be applied if you want. And I really like how Markula Center for Applied Ethics at the Santa Clara University in US are talking about ethics, or identifying ethics with a thought experiment as the birds watching. And they were saying that obviously ethical issues are like birds, and the way to for a professional bird professional watcher, if there's a word for that, is that you use multiple lenses to observe those birds. It's the same with ethics. Is one lens could be the philosophical one, which I said especially helpful when we are dealing with situations that are known. But also we can use the legislative lenses, and this is what we label as compliance ethics, but also the ones that are rooted in the culture of a country, of an industry, but also an organization. And while this shows the sheer and the beautiful complexity of ethics, is in fact mirrors the beautiful messiness of humanity. And while sometimes for some people can be a little bit overwhelming, I think if we find the right logical and structural approach to it, we are able to navigate. And we've done it in the past. So why do we get scared? And why do we keep on screaming out ethics washing, when sometimes it doesn't happen because, well, it's too complex and we need to deploy more resources. Secondly, it takes time, it doesn't happen overnight. And there are a lot of good people out there who try to do the good things. We just have to, rely on them and bring them up to the front. And well, I don't want to spend too much time in, talking about our work in PwC. I'm very proud to put in front of you the framework we have built. And this was the product of love of a group of close to 40 people from different countries. And I'm very proud to say that, in fact, the drivers of this thinking were a group of strong girls. And if they are on the call, I say hi to them. They know who they are. And I'm very proud of the work they've been doing. Also because we have tried to match all those different body of knowledge and stream it somehow for those who don't have an ethical framing. As you see, we also look at bringing the relevant theories, but also the human rights into the mix when someone starts this ethical journey, and using those principles that we've not come up with based on a collective understanding. There's actually a research among all the possible principles that exist there, and put it to a process of adapting it to a certain context. And I feel like if there's something, probably the most important part in this process is the need for contextualization, the adaptation. And it's not just about translating those principles to a context, it's being able to work with all the stakeholders that are part of this process. And this is a new one a new one for many organizations, identify all those stakeholders and actually engage in a meaningful way. Or when I say stakeholders, I also mean um, uh, 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 patients, citizens, customer, clients, depending who you are, but also your suppliers, also your employees, and also potentially groups that you might not have interacted with it, like, for example, children or people with disabilities. And before you jump into going and rushing into doing it, is really understand what's your point of view, what's your vision when it comes to ethics of AI. And while I know we don't have much time, and I want to have a little bit of time for question, very quickly I want to give you a little bit of I would say hints of how can we do it in a different way. Probably the most important change that needs to happen is a mind shift from the fundamental question that computer science is asking is, can we build it, into something, should we build it, and what can go wrong. Keep this in mind, because this is very, very important. At the moment we're still in the can we build it phase, and this doesn't help us a lot, because at the moment ethics is still as a nice to have, an afterthought in the design, and not fundamentally driving how design of those technology happens. And then the second thing is to say that ethics is a team sport, right? We manifest ethics when we come together. Therefore, making it work is both a collective and personal effort. So we need, on one hand, the data scientists and other technologies involved in the number crunching and the programming field to adhere to a Hippocratic oath for data scientists. And there have been some attempts, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we will see some progress into this. We also need support from the organization themselves and team as well. And how to do it with those two lenses, both collective and personal, is first that we need to approach it holistically and systemically. The fact that at the moment we rely too much in one-off types of initiatives that are not connected with the highest stances of organizational on ethics, diversity, and inclusion and fairness. So we have to be able to look with those lenses as well, but also throughout the life cycle of AI. But also all those plans and initiatives do not work if you don't rely on the team as being the engine of the change, and the team that can foster the right environment for empowering individuals that are able to build transparent and inclusive culture where we can be brave to challenge the status quo. We are being brave to bring ourselves to the table and being brave to represent those who didn't have a voice in the process. And also really important, which I've been talking about to my presentation previously, is the fact that when we educate on technology, either being digital upskilling or education from early ages or formal computer science education, it has to be ethically driven. The fact that we still don't say out loud that building tech has implication and impacts that are far lasting, especially when AI, and those need to be far understood before we even start collecting the data, or when we have a data set in front of us in the problem framing, is really, really important. And lastly, I think it's down to all of us, either we work in AI or we're planning to do, or in any other jobs, to be able to educate ourselves on what it means, what AI is and how AI is being used, and what's the moral stance that needs to manifest in all those cases that are being used, and especially when it comes to us, our lives, our loved ones, and our jobs and children, and try to bring it to work. I think I would want to leave you with this message, is the fact that in the world of AI, when we have a technology that surrounds us more and more, the data-driven and data-powered business growth, everyone is in ethics. And for the tech to do the right thing, all of us, we have an opportunity to contribute, and some of us a duty of care to do it right. And while I know it's a topic that is so rich, and there's so much that have been said and written about it. I have my suggestion: if you want to start this journey, or if you want to enrich your knowledge with those three resources, they are one of the best, some of the best in the field, and they've been done with a lot of goodwill and heart, with people that work tirelessly and sometimes out of their work, part of their desire to give to the world. So highly recommend you to listen to the podcast, to read those the paper and the book as a start, as a primer, and start your journey into the world of ethics of AI. And I'll stop here. Thank you very much, and looking forward to your question.
Hi, Maria. Thank you so much. That was, I mean, I can speak on behalf of everyone. It was very insightful and thought-provoking, and we can tell from all the questions that have been coming in, and we've been collecting them. Yeah, so I guess we'll just start with some of the questions. So first, Nick was wondering, who's responsible for establishing and enforcing the ethical standards for artificial intelligence systems? So I know that you come from a private sector perspective, but do you think there's room for collaboration between governments and private sector? Or do you think it's mainly private sector, corporate responsibility? Could you speak on that a little bit, please?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question, and thank you for asking. It first of all is very important to recognize that ethics is very contextually driven. So we have to be very clear about the context where we discuss about this issue. But if we are referring to the ethical stance of the society, this is where we have a full and open dialogue and transparent exchange of knowledge between everyone who has a stance of it. And I'm actually very proud to say that UK is doing a fantastic job, because also we had the benefit to have research on AI. Also, we had the commitment from our former Prime Minister, Theresa May, to make ethics as one of the competitive advantage of UK. But also geographically speaking, we're very close to each other. So we had about 3 very good years from 2016 up to the beginning of this year. When we, all of us in different groups and different walks of life in UK, we come together to create this vision of ethics for AI in UK. And we have in this wonderful ecosystem organizations that come from academia, like research institutes, but we also have someone like Ada Lovelace and the Center for Data Ethics and Innovation, but also the APGG AI, and many other institutions that come together. And all those institutions are actually bringing the wider industry together and opening up the floor, if you want, to various perspectives that need to be considered. And while this is work in progress, and I think we are in a very good place in UK, I think there are other parts of the world that are still struggle to understand the value of ethics. And I think what we do here in UK could use as a best practice example of how to engage with everyone in society when it's so much at stake, and how to learn to take this high level vision of ethics for AI at society level and then translate it in various walks of life.
Amazing, great. So for the next question, Lauren has asked, how do we protect access to AI from bad actors? Is true censorship ever really possible?
Ooh, how do you define bad actors? What's a bad actor? Is someone who hacks the system, or
That's a question? I think it's subjective. It
exactly? Is it someone, a bad actor, as the ones that we refer to in the cybersecurity work, then they come and hack a system, or is a bad actors the ones who are purposely misusing AI? And I think there are multiple examples of those ones, and I would dare to say that even the big tech companies are not in the clean with these ones, also because then they haven't spent enough time to understanding how powerful this technology is. So I think I would say it's obviously it's not possible, and let's not fool ourselves. There will always be actors out there that will understand how powerful this technology is. We've seen the signal. We see countries that actually make it part of their governance tools. Look at China, right? And acknowledge that that's why we need this conversation about morality, because we need to foster this ethical behavior as much as possible. And we know well, even the best laws will not work if we don't have a healthy moral system at society level. So we need to be fostering morality and really being the known to be able to fight with those malevolent actors that will exist anyway, no matter what we do, no matter what precautions we take.
I think that's really interesting that you say that, because we think about kind of ethical AI and these bad actors coming from outside in, and people trying to hack the system, and coders sitting in China and trying to get valuable data from companies like PwC. But it's interesting with documentaries like The Social Dilemma, and thinking about whether these bad actors or bad intentions, are they coming from outside or are they coming from inside as well? And like you said, we need people at society level to be thinking about these moral ideas and forcing companies to think morally with these ethical frameworks, because otherwise it won't just be actors from the outside, but also within, that are having these bad intentions. So I think
True.
that's a really important point.
True.
Brought up. Okay, so Jeff asks, what advice would you offer to the incoming Biden/Harris administration with respect to AI ethics concerns? And sorry, just to add on to that, Jake also asks if there is privacy in an AI world. I think there.
Ooh. Can I start with the second question, because I like it more? Although when you work in the ethics of AI, it's very difficult not to be political. I think I want to sometimes I want to stay clear as much as possible. But I'll ask. I will respond to the second question. And frankly, honestly, I would say no. Let's not fool ourselves. I think that's what I said when AI is challenging ourselves, because it's challenging the notion of privacy, right? So and also acknowledge that privacy means something different in individualistic cultures, and the Western world are known to be individualistic, where the emphasis is put on the individual, versus the collective culture in the Far East, in Asia, where privacy means totally different thing. So I think it's also important for us to acknowledge that the best privacy preserving tools will not work with machine learning, right? With a huge volume of data, everyone is identifiable. So I think it's also having, I would say, out of the box conversation of what privacy means, and how do we again protect ourselves against those who try to interfere with our personal space, and what does it mean, this personal space. For the first for the first question, I would say, I think from what I've seen before the election, the Democrats had, I would say, a better understanding of the harms caused by the algorithms, and they have been engaged with quite a large number of researchers and activists in the US. So I'm confident they will come with a different approach to regulating AI with the ethical stance. But there is something more profound that not just the new administration needs to be looking at, but also the Congress, which is how do we look at the beyond the technology itself and regulating itself into the institution those big tech companies have become. And if you look at the most valuable companies in the world, guess what? They are all AI companies. They are what they are because of AI. Let's not fool ourselves. And how we address that, because that problem has not been solved. And I know the Congress is working on it. I would want to see this being accelerated, because the Silicon Valley world has been allowed for too long to run very fast and break things, and for them to play not by the rules but by their own rules. And I think it was time, few years back, to put some rules in place to allow for a level play field. The danger is if that doesn't happen very fast, is that even someone like European Commission with the view of being able to compete with likes of China or America will be tempted to loosen up a tighter look to technology, and with that there's a lot of stake. So that's what I would say: accelerate whatever happens at the Congress level, and being able to have some meaningful results at the moment. Because look, what has happened with Facebook after Cambridge Analytica scandal? I just want to leave it there. Nothing.
Not much.
So far, not much.
Not
Look
enough.
at their share value. That says it all. So.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting that you say that. And your last point kind of ties in with one question that we received from Theodora, and she asks, is it common for biased AI systems to be allowed to operate on the basis that the advantages outweigh the downsides?
Oh, what a good question. I'm tempted to say that as long as is allowed to continue, as long as we are aware of the biases. And also, I think there is very important to clarify the distinction between bias and discrimination. Not all biases are bad. And if you look at how psychology sees biases as the shortcuts of the brain that allow us to be very efficient in day-to-day life, is not necessarily something bad. But the whole conversation around bias in AI has turned the bias itself as something negative. I think we need to be very careful at, again, looking at a context, at each context level. What exactly do we mean by bias? Is it why we're in danger of excluding people or treating unjustly? And then therefore there's the answer is no, we should not be doing this. But what exactly the bias we're meaning? Also, I'm actually a bit of a fan, and this is where I was a bit disappointed with Amazon that they have scrapped the tool so fast, although I understand it because there was a lot of stake. How else would we learn if we don't allow for this tool to happen in a controlled environment, and being able to see if we have fixes that are beyond technology, how fast those fixes will work, and how well we can translate this in something that is done all together, rather than just you do the technical fix it and then you worry about, oh, I don't have enough diversity in my data collection. Oh, I should have started with that. Oh, how do I address now that my model is all trained?
Great. Thank you for that. And Virginia asked a question on ethics in AI and a responsible research innovation framework. And she basically is asking, could you expand on how you think about applying ethics in AI within a responsible research innovation framework, and sort of how you'd go about doing this in the future?
A very good question. First of all, I'm not a fan of frameworks. I know I work for a consultancy and this is what we do for a living. Frameworks, PowerPoints, and speeches, right? But also I'm a practical person, and I'm thinking, how can we actually achieve results, not just quickly, but sustainable and safe? So I would say that the same approach that I'm advocating for in the education of computer science, shifting from can I build it to should I build it, to be applied in the research as well. Just because we can research something, how do we approach it with those big ethical questions instead? And while we have lots of different frameworks that have been created at our disposal, I can tell you about my experience that we are in the midst of such project in PwC, and I see the shortcoming of those frameworks. And actually, it's very beneficial to step in with an open mind and start asking questions, just to warm up people, just to bring them on take the ethical person out of where it's being hidden, because we live such fast-paced lives, and also being able to empower people to contribute. And that's when you start seeing how powerful people are when they display their ethical compass versus a framework that you apply. Frameworks, of course, are useful to give you a bit of a structure, but ultimately it's about people who will make sense. So I will say we need to apply the same principle. Should I research it? Because those are the moral implication that I have to deal with. And if I research it anyway, what are the big safeguards I need to be put in place when this will become mainstream and will be applied in day-to-day life?
Thank you for that. So Bogdan asks about, kind of similar to the discussion we had before about where responsibility lies and the role of international law. So he talked about kind of whether ethical frameworks should be regulated by law, including international law, as we've seen people being robo-fired under the Uber lawsuit case, and in cases where human rights are being breached, whether AI systems and the accused could be challenged, could challenge judicial decisions because of IP rights.
Yeah, that's another very good and interesting question. And I'm the way to approach it is to be aware of again the context that each jurisdiction, because each country and each region will have its own set of rules that are in fact useful to regulating AI. So I know, for example, the work we're doing with regulators both here in UK and the European Commission, we know that they are not just looking at create new regulation, which was an extra level of burden to all those in the field and stifle innovation, yes, but also looking at the current laws and regulations and how they need to be fine-tuned to respond to the provocation of AI. One of this is, for example, the product liability in European Union is now currently is being assessed alongside a new regulatory approaches at European Commission level to see how to best use it to determine exactly what Bogdan has asked in terms of liability of individuals and organizations when it comes to AI system that have such a high degree of complexity and different actors that contribute to an outcome or not. So I think there is a long way, but also I'm a big fan, and I hope many in the space regulation law are actually reused from what we have and only create new laws when they are highly needed. And something, as I said before, is we have to acknowledge that the laws will not work if we don't have a moral society, if you want, that in relation to the technology. And we also are not able to challenge, and we know that in some cases certain actors have become good at finding ways to avoid the laws. So ultimately the AI needs an ecosystem of good governance to allow us to reap those benefits. So not just relying on law as the last saving grace, but relying on, again, on a good behavior and a collective good behavior.
So I know that we're running out of time, so Bertie and I are just gonna ask one last question, although we have plenty more to ask.
I can stay for let's say 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Okay. So we'll just ask one more question each. Bertie, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So Bernd has said, thank you, Maria, for a great talk. And he says, I'm interested in how we can translate all these codes of ethics or guidelines, principles into pragmatic action and tangible outcomes. He says that many business stakeholders are interested in acting ethically, but don't know how to translate those aspirations into practice.
That's a very good question, and thank you for asking. Is I think where most of the people are stuck at the moment. Once we have those principles and we have done a good job in adapting it to our context, what's next? And this is what's next is depends very much of where each organization are. But I will say that probably where things can have the most impact is at the product development level, right? We have to start having ethically aligned product development processes. And that's not just focused on when we create the MVP, and not only when we we look at the data set. It is in ideation and innovation process, and being able to have people who ask those questions in those stages, and while we navigate and we grow the product and we move from MVP and experiment and POC into a scale product, those questions are being asked again and again at different level. I would say this is the best start, right? I will highly recommend you to check the responsible AI practice of Microsoft. They have developed some very good tools that will help you navigate some, I would say, are a little bit more exciting than the typical impact assessments. They are just lists because they act like they're based on gamifying the experience, and they have all sorts of judgment calls and impact assessment that are done as games. Also, on the other network that have produced this ethical explorer pack, and again is very useful. I will say focus at the product level, but also when you focus at the product level, besides the process itself, look at the team that is involved, and not just the team structure, but also, for example, do you have economists, do you have psychologists that you can actually bring them in and get their perspective when you build something that involves sensitive data, or something that is said to have a profound economic impact. So it's not just about who are the people that you bring at the table, it's like how well are you including diverse perspective, and those diverse perspectives contribute to your decision making. Those two are the best, but you also have to have the big boss signing up to it. So watch the space, because this is my mission now, is actually to convert all those C-suites and CEOs to actually say, yes, the only thing we're going to do right now is ethics of AI, or responsible AI, because if it's not responsible AI, there should be no AI. So.
I couldn't agree more. And finally, I guess, moving to a more society level, how do you think, so you mentioned that AI is a mirror of the status quo and of society. So if this is the case, how can we turn it into a force to challenge and change the status quo? And in line with this, what kind of values do you think we should uphold specifically at the stage of data collection and processing?
Oh, what a lovely question to end up our conversation on. I think we're already doing it, and that's why I'm optimistic. Even if I personally dislike social dilemma, and I'm allowed to say it out loud for many reasons, and I can talk about it at a different time, we have been made progress in understanding the dangers of this technology, and not just at the research and activist level, at the wider society. And the fact that we have all those formal groups that are meeting and assessing the status quo, and also what is the way forward, is a strong indication we are actually using, we are stepping into this opportunity the AI give us, because we have seen what can go wrong, and we are now acting upon it. When it comes of values, and what values, I would say everyone's values. I think is we have done such a bad work in the past, in human history, to leave so many people aside and ignore and marginalize so many different people. Now is the time for us to bring everyone in. And when we say diversity and inclusion, not just replace the one value system with another and suppress the others that will have different values, be able to accept it all, because now we all have to, we discover that we're all valuable, and we are living in such an extraordinary moment in history where we literally start to appreciate very formally and openly different voices and perspectives, but there's always a danger to push those to contradict us, as has happened with the US election dialogue. If you're not with me, you're racist, and so on, and vice versa. So I think we have to start having a more dialogue and understand where people are coming from when they have those perspectives and what motivates them. And I will want to end with something that I'm a firm believer, is that I believe in the good nature of people. And if they turn out to be bad or turn out to be way wire, it's because there's something has happened down the line that made them to be that way. But if we are um, getting our hands together around the person or group of individuals, the healing of the process can start. And by just pointing fingers, as has happened in the last few months with the election and with everything that we've seen in UK, is not helpful. But what is helpful is for us to be very respectful, truly, about each other's values and opinion. And when we go and, start those big journeys and conquering new planets and discovering new worlds and building exciting technology, we really have to bring this attitude to it, not just pointing fingers saying, just because you represent a value or a group that has been, discriminated other groups in the past, you should be silenced. That's not the way forward. It will be damaging a long term. Now that we are here to heal the wounds, let's do it and not repeat it again.
Yeah, I mean, that's very well said, and that's a lovely way to close, not just within AI, but in politics and in the way we live our lives every day. So thank you so much for joining us today, Maria. It was such a pleasure to have you. It was a really insightful talk, and I'm sure all of our attendees enjoyed it as much as Bertie and I and the rest of the team. So thank you very much. And we hope to see you again soon, maybe live next year.
It will be my pleasure, and it was a pleasure. And thank you very much to both you, Anya, and Bertie for organizing this. And thank you all of you guys who listened to us talk. And obviously, if you have more questions, more than happy, reach out to me on social media, LinkedIn or Twitter, and let's continue this conversation. And it's down to you guys. It's not just us that currently work in AI. I think if we want to make it work, I'm relying on you as well, and your peers, and the ones that are gonna listen to those conversations you guys are organizing, because we need this. We need to continue and keep this momentum coming. And I'm very optimistic, and the things will turn out okay because of people like you have been on the call, and that's the best news of all. So thank you.